Last-minute snags appear to be complicating things on the fourth day for hostages in Gaza and Palestinian detainees in Israel to be released. This is also the final day under the original agreement, but this morning there is growing momentum to extend it. That would mean more moments like this one. That is Margalit Moses thanking the staff at Wolfson Hospital in Tel Aviv. The 78-year-old has cancer, and she had been undergoing treatment daily when she was taken hostage in Nir Oz on October the 7th. The return of the hostages is setting off joyous scenes in Israel, and there are reunions and celebrations for Palestinian families as well. 117 Palestinians are now freed from detention in Israel. Most of Sunday's group are teenage boys. Under the existing agreement, Israel will release 150 detainees and Hamas will free 50 hostages from Gaza. We begin this hour with Margaret Evans, our senior international correspondent, and she is live with us from Jerusalem. Margaret, as I just mentioned, this is the final day of the four-day pause in the fighting. The deal to release hostages and detainees also coming to an end, but talk of extension and talk of delays. What is the latest this hour?
Well, yes, Heather, a real contradiction there, as you point out. The latest that we're hearing is that there still isn't a final confirmation on the list of Israeli hostages to be released today. I think you can imagine how that excruciating it is for people waiting to see if their families are going to be on that list. What we're hearing, unconfirmed reports, are that it's a problem similar to what we saw on the second day of this pause, wherein there's a dispute about whether or not children should be being released without their mothers. Israel accusing Hamas of going back on an agreement to ensure that mothers and children are released together. That's potentially one of the issues. But at the same time, we're all hearing that Hamas is interested in pursuing an extension of the pause. We're hearing that from sources in Egyptian governments and Qatar. And there is, from the Israeli side, an answering message of willingness if more hostages are offered up. And there is a provision within the existing four-day pause for this to extend if that happens. Have a listen to what the Israeli government spokesman had to say about that this morning.
Hamas is on notice. That option for an extension is open. We want to receive another additional 50 hostages beyond tonight on our way to bringing everyone home. So, again, mixed signals there. And one of the things to point out here is that Hamas has said that it is not in charge of all of the hostages in the Gaza Strip. We've heard that, of course, from Israeli sources as well, that other militant factions may be holding some of those prisoners, that potentially individuals had been acting as well. And that leads to kind of a murky area when you're talking about what hostages might be available for release. And of course, you must remember that on the Palestinian side as well, there are families waiting to see whether or not their family members will be chosen for release from Israeli jails. The Israelis putting together a list at the start of this process of 300 potential Palestinians who could be released. And of course, there's discussion about who would be on those lists as well. So it's extremely complicated.
Last night, Margaret, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, releasing a video statement saying that would be welcome, this whole idea of extending the truce. What kind of pressure is he under to do so?
Well, enormous pressure. He had a conversation with the U.S. President George Biden yesterday, who has been very clear he wants to see the pause extended. The NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has been pushing today for an extension. European Union governments, and obviously regional Arab governments as well want to see this happen. Aid agencies saying this hasn't been enough time to make even a drop of relief to the Palestinians in need inside Gaza, more than 1 million people displaced from their homes. But I think the real pressure is going to come from within Israel itself, Israeli hostages, their families. And after this 7 weeks of extreme stress for the families of those hostages and trauma, for people watching, worrying about what's going to happen, these scenes of reunions over the past 3, potentially today as well, days, are speaking a lot to the psychology here, and that will put pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu as well. This is a message delivered by Inbar Goldstein, who is the sister of a woman and her 3 children who came out just yesterday. Have a listen.
We want to thank all of you for the support. We're the ones who brought them back, us, you, everyone who supported and stated their voice and spoke up. So please continue doing that for all the rest of the hostages out there.
I should say too, Heather, that there will be pressure on Netanyahu from within his hardline governing coalition as well to make sure that if there is an extension of this pause, that it isn't long enough to give Hamas the ability to regroup. Israel Defense Forces saying that they are degrading Hamas's ability to operate. And just yesterday, Mr. Netanyahu visited Israeli soldiers in Gaza, in northern Gaza, and he said that Israel is prepared to restart the conflict with full force after this pause is over.
Margaret, thank you so much. Margaret Evans, our senior international correspondent, live from Jerusalem as we continue to follow the Israel-Hamas war.